How's it going, everyone? This is Dr. Brent Pritt with Science of Falling. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I'm here at Sonoma Hills Physical Therapy in Petaluma, California. If you're in the area or you come to the area, you need PT services, this is a great place to come. Great people, great service. You will leave feeling fantastic. Now let's get into today's video. Today is my very first falling technique video that I want to get out and put on the website and bring to you. But before we get to the technique, I want to talk a little bit about why we should learn how to fall as health practitioners, as coaches of any kind in the movement field, and why we should teach our patients or our clients to do the same. Now, if we think about a fall risk patient going to a PT clinic, a chiropractor, whatever it might be, or even the doctor's office, usually what they're going to be told is to work on balance, work on strength, work on their reaction time to catch themselves, or also how to get up off the ground when they fall. Now, these are two ends of a spectrum, and oftentimes, probably about 90% of the time I would say, we forget about this middle part, the actual fall itself. Rarely do clinicians teach a patient how to fall appropriately and safely. Now, to me, this doesn't make much sense. We're missing this huge piece where if we had a patient that knew how to fall, they could reduce their injury risk dramatically. And if anything, they could come out of it without any injury at all. Now, I get a lot of these ideas for falling techniques from the world of parkour that I was a part of and I still am involved in quite often. And the reason this is because parkour is urban gymnastics. It is meant to be done in the concrete jungle of the city, in an area where falling can be hazardous to many, yet these athletes are able to jump extraordinary heights and fall extraordinary lengths and still come out of it unscathed, at most with a few bruises and maybe every once in a while a sprained wrist or ankle. And these athletes do it at heights that could take someone out and break their leg easily. So part of this is conditioning. They've been doing it for a long time, but part of it is these techniques they use. And if we can bring these techniques into the clinical world, our patients will be all the better. So today's technique is the vertical jump, or the vertical fall rather. This technique is going to be good not only for the athlete or the everyday citizen, but people that are doing extreme things like a construction worker on the roof of a house, putting some shingles down or something, and they trip and they fall vertically down to the ground. Now, most people would say, well, this type of fall is going to be an instant injury. And you'd probably be right. It's most likely going to be a pretty severe injury, maybe broken legs, at very least a broken ankle or tibia or something, especially from a roof height that's, looking at around minimum 10 feet, if not more. So today's technique is going to be, the more advanced technique that I'm going to teach is going to be helping these people reduce that injury risk. Now, there's a few parts to this technique, the vertical falling technique. The first part is just learning how to squat. If you have someone who doesn't have good squat mechanics, they can't do this technique because it just won't work as efficiently. So to do this technique and do the squat, you want to dorsiflex the ankles, bend the knees, bend at the hips. Now, when you're doing this, you need your client or yourself to focus on keeping the knees over the second and third toes. You don't want their knees coming out or their knees coming in. As many as you know, in athletes, this can be a key to ACL tears. Not going to be good. So ankles are dorsiflexing, knees going over the second and third toes, going straight, and the hips are going to come back. You are going to get that hip hinge in there and come down to a nice squat. Have your client do that a few times. Make sure their technique is on point, because when you add force and load and velocity coming down to this, it can change everything if they don't have it. So now to the first technique. It's just basically jumping. Now, a lot of us don't think it's jumping as falling, but it actually is a controlled fall that most of us can handle. Now, if you think about a basketball player going up for a layup or something, they're coming down. If they come down and one of their legs comes in, could be a recipe for disaster. So the way we do this, we're going to start from the ankles, the knees, to the hips for the proper technique for this, so that something like this doesn't happen and the force doesn't hurt the body. You're going to start with purely the sound of the jump. If you jump and you slap the ground, That's a lot of force. That actually kind of hurt my feet doing that. But if you jump very quiet, it means there's less force going through your body. So simply have your client jump and try to make their hops as quiet as possible. A trick to do this is to take your client's shoes off. When the shoes are off, there is no padding underneath the foot. They have to absorb every ounce of shock that comes through them. And if you take the shoes off, the bones are taking all that force if they don't do it correctly. So they will instantly get softer and softer as they do a couple rounds of that. Once we have a nice, quiet jump, bring the knees more into it. Now you're gonna give them some cues on the knees. Again, second to third toe is where you want the knees pointed. You can tell them about having their knees feel like headlights pointing forward. Any cue that works for you and your patient is gonna be the best cue for them as long as you follow that tracking line. So again, soft landing, knees going over to second or third toes. Easy, right? All right. Next is gonna be the hips. Again, this technique is just like squatting. They need to bring the hips back. If they jump and they don't squat down when they land, they just leave the hips where they are and they just use the knees, this will happen. It's very hard to balance. You get pushed back, the knees have to jut forward. You're trying to get those ankles over your center of mass, and it just can't happen if your knees bend and your hips don't. So they need to hinge at the hips, just like so. And once they're in this position, ideally, most of their weight's gonna be through the center of their foot, coming straight down from the center of the mass. So that is the basic jumping vertical falling technique right there. So once they master the squat, they master just jumping from the ground, it's time to kick it up a notch and have them practice from actual realistic heights. So here I have 3 boxes, 3 different heights. This one is about 2 to 3 inches. I would say probably about 4 to 5, and probably about 8 inches on this one. You're gonna have them stand up on a box or an elevated surface. From here, you're simply just gonna have them step off and land. You can do that from all the heights, whatever you like. Land, and land. I would say have them alternate which foot they step off with, just to make sure they're even with any difference in the muscular activity. Once they have the squat, the jumping technique, and the simply stepping off, you're gonna add it all together, and from the box heights, you're gonna add in the jump. So they're gonna jump and land. Jump and land. And finally, from the highest box you choose to take them on, they're gonna jump and land. Now, one key point to that landing, especially when you get higher, is that a lot of the force should be coming through the balls of their feet first. So no landing on the heels, because that's gonna be a lot of force, just jarring the entire body. All about landing on the toes. And if they're very good, they can simply land on toes without bringing the foot all the way down to the heels even. So that adds a little extra spring in there instead of just hitting a brick wall with the heel. So once we have all those masters, squat, jump, step off, jump off, we need to assess their everyday life and say, okay, are you a construction worker that's gonna fall off a roof sometime? Do you need something a little more intense of a falling technique to make sure that you make it out of your day, every day, perfect? So what that is gonna be is a technique that we're gonna call the slap out. This technique takes everything we just learned, so the ankles, the soft landing, the knees going over second through third toes, the hips coming back, all of that. We're gonna change 2 things though. We're gonna widen up the stance a little bit, and then we're gonna use the arms now. Instead of just using the arms for balance, just like a normal squat, the arms are actually gonna come down and slap the ground, quote unquote. You're not actually gonna slap it and add more force, and you're just gonna meet the ground, and then you're gonna stand up. So what this does is, takes that falling technique and lengthens it. The longer a technique is, the more force is gonna be absorbed over a longer duration. So that means less force per second is gonna be absorbed by the body. Really good technique if we're falling anywhere above about hip height, I would say. Above hip height, the normal jump and catch doesn't do as much, isn't as effective. So to add this all up, what you're gonna do is soft landing, second through third toes, that's where your knee is gonna be tracking over, hip hinge coming down, and if they're coming from a greater height, they're gonna do the slap out technique involving a deeper hinge and the hands coming in between the legs and slapping out. Now, one thing I wanna mention is if you come with the knees between the arms instead of the wider stance and arms coming between the legs, depending on the height, your patient is at risk for hitting themselves in the chin as their body stretches out. And hitting yourself in the chin with your own knee, not very fun. I've done it before, not a good time. So again, you want them to start this technique from the jumping position, have them do that a few times, then go from the standing height, just get a little bit right there. And then once they master all that, you can add the jump and really get them getting height and absorbing the force fully through that. So, for example, just like that. And there you have it, the vertical falling techniques, both the normal jumping and landing catch, and also the slap out for higher level falls. These are both perfect for vertical falls. The jumping and slap out is actually good for forward falls where you have a little momentum and you don't need to roll out or do any other technique that I will teach you in the future. There you have it. That is the vertical falling techniques. See you next time.